Hey everybody, this is Peter with Tabletop Gaming Guild, and today we're going to be looking at another RPG by Rowan, Rook, and Deckard, and this one is Voidheart Symphony by Minerva McJonda. This is a really interesting game with the idea that you and your players are going to be playing in an everyday city. You can choose a real life city from New York, Chicago, LA, Tokyo, London, whatever city you would like, maybe a city you know well, making so that way you can bring it to life a little bit easier. Or you and your players might decide to create a city of your own imaginations together. And in this game, your players are going to be going through their everyday lives. They're going to be making what the game is called covenants, major ones and minor ones. And these are the people who they are close to, the people that they draw power from because of their relationships, and they're going to be gaining some power from the city that they love as well. But as they go through their everyday lives, they're going to notice the injustices in the world, the evil that's in the world, and how it is affecting the lives of the people around them, their own lives, those that they have, those major and minor covenants, those people that are their major relationships. They're going to see how those things, how bad things are starting to happen, whatever those things might be, and they are going to choose to rebel and to rise up and investigate and see who it is that is behind, or what it is that is behind the injustice in the world in their lives. And as they do this, they're going to be crossing over into a supernatural world as well, known as the castle, where the big bad, or the individual who is the antagonist in this game. In the game, they're known as the vassal, where they're drawing their power from. So there'll be an investigation happening in the real world, in the city that they live in, and then eventually they will find a way to cross over into the castle, into the world where the vassal gets their power. And as the players cross over into this world, their visages will change. They change and they gain their own powers. They are imbued with power from the castle and the void as well. And so there will be a tug of war happening in their lives as they balance the city and the people that they love in the world, and this castle where they gain powers and they're able to cause change, in a very discernible way. And I think that is a really cool idea. Each player will choose from a list of playbooks, and in another word, kind of choosing a class that they'll be playing as. Each player chooses a playbook, and the book does let you know that they don't think that players should double up. Everybody should choose a different playbook, a different class, if you will, and together the players and the architect, or the games master for this game, architect is the term that they use, they're going to build the city. They're going to figure out through the investigation who this vassal is, and they're going to do their best to change the world, to make it better for their friends and their family. But as they gain power, try to balance what it is they're doing and how it's changing them. Because as they play through the game and they make these changes, they will have the possibility of gaining more power, but also slipping further into the void that the vassal has already. So we're going to get into the book itself. I will show you some of the parts of the book, how the game is played a little bit, and then we'll come back up and I'll tell you my final thoughts on the game. And again, this is Voidheart Symphony by Minerva McJonda, published by Rowan, Rook, and Deckard. Let's head down to the table and take a look. All right, everybody, so we're down to the table with Voidheart Symphony by Minerva McJonda. We're going to go ahead and read the back of the book like I usually do. There's a wound in the world, a rot eating at hope and community and empathy. You've seen it in the dark alleyways and gleaming boardrooms, gifting terrible power to those who will use it to hurt others. You've had enough. You're going to dive through that wound into the nightmare castle on the other side. You're going to find the avatar of the one bringing you misery and strike them down. But what's next? Once you've stolen their power and ruined their plans, will you return to your daily grind, cherish those close to you, or revel in the power you have taken from the void? Because within that wound, the castle waits, and it is hungry. Voidheart Symphony is a tabletop role-playing game about mundane people diving into a demon-filled labyrinth to save the ones they love. Based on Apocalypse World and Rhapsody of Blood, it's full of dramatic choices and dynamic action. Your rebel might be a potent authority, a caring provider, an insightful watcher, but your enemy cannot be faced alone. You'll need to draw on your friends and allies, a journalist giving you the searing light of the sun, a caring mentor granting the healing power of the gardener. You'll need that strength as you investigate your targets in the mundane world and as you fight uncanny foes in that horrifying other world. The world and the void will both offer you their power and make their own demands. How will you strike that balance? What will your revolution fight for? That's your story to tell. This is UFO Press, Rowan, Rook, and Deckard, powered by the Apocalypse. So that is the back of Voidheart Symphony, telling us a little bit about the game that we're going to be looking through today. Let's go ahead and jump into the table of contents. All right, so here we have our credits page and our table of contents. The book itself is broken up into 8 chapters. We have Chapter 1, The Overture, Chapter 2, Rules of the City, Chapter 3, All About the Rebels, Chapter 4, The Covenants, Chapter 5, The Architect, Chapter 6, The Castle's Terrors, Chapter 7, The City You Live In, and Chapter 8, Voidheart and the Tarot. So Overture is going to give us kind of the broad overview of the game itself with a look at the core rules of the game and some inspirations for the game and also the game setup. And that's going to get you into your first game of Voidheart Symphony. Chapter 2, Rules of the City, is going to give us more of the actual how to play the game information broken down into a bunch of different parts here. Chapter 3, The Rebels, gives us the anatomy of the playbooks that the players will be choosing from when creating their characters and choosing what type of rebels they're going to be playing as. So also known as kind of like your class in the game. So you're going to be choosing from one of these choices, and that is going to be the playbook that you take into playing the game as you create your character sheet and make your character. And then Chapter 4 is our covenants. So covenants in the game are the relationships that your player has with other players and NPCs. There are minor covenants and major covenants. And so the minor covenants are those that you have an ongoing relationship with, but maybe it's not as strong or as meaningful as a major covenant. So a major covenant, and each one of these are going to in some way empower you either in the world or in the castle, which are the 2 areas that you will be playing the game in, the 2 worlds you'll be playing the game in. Each one of them is going to be described using one of these options here. And these are taken again kind of as from the author's version of the tarot. And we'll get a look at those as well when we flip through those pages. The Architect is the name that is given to the games master for Voidheart Symphony. And in this section, that person will get some really good information on what this game is meant to look like, how to run the game, and how to keep things going. And then the Castle's Terrors is going to get into the creatures that the players may come across as they play through the game, specifically again in the castle, because the game takes place in the world and in the castle. In the world, they're going up against just regular people, individuals, and then this is the area where we're going to have the monster manual is for the Castle's Terrors. And we'll get information on the big bad as well, which is the vassal in this game. And then the city you live in, this is going to have some information and ideas for the city that you will be playing in. And then Voidheart and the Tarot, it just has some information on how to use this game's version of those cards to kind of choose random adventures or stories as you're setting up the scenario that you're going to be playing in this game. And again, Voidheart Symphony is much more of a conversation between the players and the architect as they go through the game. It's not one that it's not highly recommended that you sit down as the architect and plot out every single thing that's going to be happening to your players and then run them through that, but giving them information and giving them the options that are in the game to then interact with those scenarios, and only when necessary start rolling dice. So we'll take a closer look at that as well. But we're just going to flip through the book, and I'll give you my thoughts as well at the end when we come back up from the table. So chapter 1, the overture. We get a little bit about the Age of Oblivion, and again, the idea in this world is that there's a wound at the heart of the world, and on the other side of that wound is this supernatural castle where monsters and the void are, and the power that seeps from the castle latches on to a single individual who is known as the vassal, and that vassal is gifted a shard of the castle, and it empowers them, and they use that power for evil, and they start to cause trouble in the world, and the people that the players know are being affected by that, and that can take a lot of different forms. And for this game specifically, it is very personal. There's a little box here that says this is a political game. It's very personal for Minerva McJonda, who wrote this, as she states that she is angry at the world, and this is our world, the real world, with the injustices that are going on in it, and she has tried to put together a game that can reflect that and give a catharsis for people who are trying to deal with their anger in the world, and then also give them motivations to make the world a better place. So the game itself, each player is going to be playing a rebel. The architect is going to be running the game and the scenarios, and the majority of the sessions that you have are going to be unfolding as investigations. And this is where the rebels are playing in the real world, and they are trying to figure out who the vassal is. Who is this person that the castle has latched onto and is empowering to make bad the lives of the people in the world? Once they find that person, that is when the rebels will then cross over into this other supernatural world, into the castle itself, to fight the avatar of the vassal in that world, trying to take the power from them, separate them from the castle, and then hopefully make the world a better place. And when they cross over, strange things will definitely happen, not just to the world, but to the rebels themselves. This is a Powered by the Apocalypse game, and so there are some similarities and differences from that original kind of rule set, and this box here is going to have some information about those similarities and differences as well. And then there's a nice little primer here on how to use this book. It gives you each of the individual chapters and like a little paragraph about them, or a sentence or so about them. And that might help you as you're diving into the book, because this is a very thick book and there's a lot going on in it, and it can be a bit confusing, as I feel like the structure of it doesn't flow super well. I've myself have found myself jumping back and forth because something is pointing to somewhere else in the book, and there's just the way my mind works. All of a sudden I've got to jump there and I want to see what that has to say, and then I've got to go back to where I was. Also, most books like this, where it has the full rules in one book, it's not broken up into a player's book and a games master book. It's all one book. I personally feel like most of the time the person who gets this book is going to be the architect, is going to be the games master. And so the fact that that doesn't show up until way back here in the back of the book almost, is a little confusing for me, because there's a lot of really good information about how the architect will bring this world to life and kind of the ideas that they need to be focusing on. And for me, I probably would have found that to be a little bit more appropriate towards the front of the book rather than later in the book. But that's just a personal preference. We get into a little bit about the core rules of the game, which again is its moves and the conversation. So throughout the book, there are going to be moves that the players can make. And I'm just going to go ahead and do what I was doing as I read the book. I was jumping all over the place. And at the very, very back of the book is the move index. And this is actually going to tell you the pages where each of these moves are in the book, their descriptions, because the moves indicate the actions that the players, the rebels, can take, and then the type of dice that they'll be rolling to see if they can succeed or fail in those moves. Here we have a box for the moves that are always available to the players, no matter where they are in the game. There is a section here just on moves that are triggered while they are in the castle, moves that are triggered only in the city itself, and then moves that are used to shape the flow of a session or investigation. So a lot of different actions, or moves as they're called in the game, and they're all over the book in different places. So this is a really good index to have available and ready so that you can jump back and forth in this game. So a really good index to have so that you're ready to run the game. Another little paragraph down here about the architect's role. And again, you're going to be reacting to the players here. There's not a whole lot that the architect is going to do in the idea of, they're not going to be rolling dice in this game. They're just going to be reacting to what the players are doing. They're going to be describing the world, setting that world for them in a visual way, and then guiding the conversation and reacting. There are reactions that they can have in response to the roles and the actions of the players. And there's a little chart here, a little flow chart, kind of giving you that idea as well. So the dice mechanics in this game is broken up into two sections. There's a mechanic for while the players are in the city, and then a mechanic for while they are in the castle. And they're having stress gauges, which, if you've played any of the games by Rowan, Rook, and Deckard, will sound a little familiar. And let's see if I can jump forward again to the spot where you'll see that. So right down here, especially while they're in the city, then the players are gauging their stress in blood, lack, infamy, heat, and fealty. And as these marks tick up and down, that's going to adjust the number that they're shooting for, that they're trying to roll against while in the game. So it states here that when you turn to dice in the city, you make a check against one of these gauges. And to do this, you're going to be rolling 2 6-sided dice and compare them to the ticks in that gauge. If both dice are higher than the amount of ticks, then that's a strong hit. If only one dice is higher, then it's a weak hit. And if neither dice are higher than the amount of ticks that you have in that gauge, it's a miss, and the architect will make a reaction. So that's going to give you an idea of, as you decide to take an action, then you're going to be rolling against one of the stress gauges, depending on which one that action is represented by. And then you will figure out by rolling if you succeed or not. And then when you're in the castle, you have your castle stats, which are different than the ones we just looked at for in the city. And in this one, you have swords, coins, wands, and cups. And you'll be rolling against some numbers for those as well. And in this one, you're going to be rolling your dice, two-sided dice again. You're going to add the named stat for that roll, and then you're going to be adding the dice number, the amount of pips on the dice as well. And it says here that if your stat plus your roll is 7 or above, then it's a hit. If it's 7 to 9, it's a weak hit. If it's a 10 plus, it's a strong hit. If the sum is 6 or less, it's a miss. And unless the move sets out what happens on a miss, the architect will make a reaction. So some of the moves, if you miss, it already states what's going to happen. And if it doesn't state that, then the architect gets to make a reaction as well. There is advantage and disadvantage in the game, which can come in the form of some of your covenants, whether that be a player character or an NPC trying to help you in some way. And that will give you the benefit of rolling an extra die and taking the highest 2 from that result. So you'll be rolling 3 dice, but you don't get to add all 3. You just take the 2 that are highest and you utilize those. And then opposite of that, with disadvantage, you roll a 3rd die and you'll take the 2 lowest dice and be adding those together. So you do have some advantage and disadvantage as well when you're playing. So you're going to be playing with D6s. You're going to be rolling 2, with advantage or disadvantage rolling 3, and then you'll be adding the relevant stats to those numbers, or you'll be comparing them to your stress gauges. So that is the core dice mechanics of the game as you're playing. Now, the game setup is a really interesting part of the book because, again, with this being a very conversation-driven game, the idea here with the game setup is Minerva wants to get the players into the game as quick and as easily as possible. And so when you're going to sit down with your players, you're going to be following this as a guideline for your very first session. And in your very first session, you are diving into the darkness. You're going to be going into the castle to face the very first vassal of the game. So we're skipping the investigation portion in the very first session. You're going to jump in. You're going to be discussing what is expected from the game. You're going to discuss what your enemy looks like and what your city looks like. Everybody is going to choose a playbook, and it is suggested here that no 2 players choose the same playbook. So everyone's having a different class. They're bringing something different to the party. And you create a relationship map, and it will walk you through that. Then you will figure out your first foe, the vassal of the current castle of the castle itself. So the current vassal of the castle, and then you will dive into the darkness. You're going to end up facing the vassal, so that's all laid out here, and then there will be an aftermath once the battle has finished. And whether you have defeated the vassal or the vassal defeats the players, everyone lives, but there's a different fallout that happens here in the aftermath portion of this beginning session. You go back to reality, which is the world in which everyone lives, and there's a layout for how that works as well. And then you move on to, it says the next investigation, but technically it would end up being really the first investigation because we've kind of skipped that the very first time. So you're going to be playing through this scenario, and this is just setting up your game. This is the very first session, and it kind of sets the idea of the world itself. It gives everybody a chance to see how the combat against the vassal in the castle works. And then you will continue, hopefully, if you've enjoyed yourselves, playing the game and now seeing what it's like to be the rebels, but in the real world, in whatever city it is you have chosen to play in. So here's a section for questions about your city and questions for the rebels. And then there is a section here on inspirations. So this is a lot of the times this might find itself in like an appendices at the end of the book, but the writer has decided to put these earlier in the book, giving you some things to either watch or to read or to play that might inspire you in running this game. Persona 5, I know, is a video game that gets brought up quite often in the text of the book itself, as being highly inspirational to the author. I've never played it myself, but I know of the game. But there are games, there are books that are suggested for reading or playing to inspire you in this world. And I know as I read through the book, an inspiration for me, the thing that I kept thinking of was the TV show Daredevil, part of the Marvel world, because that story very much, I think, reflects the idea here being normal people, the friends of the main character, who are going up against and investigating someone that they can't quite figure out who it is who is causing the evil in the world. And then eventually they do what they can once they figure out who that person is to bring them down. And though they don't cross over into a supernatural world, Daredevil is somewhat supernatural himself, and so when he fights, it's kind of like the rebels fighting in the castle. So with chapter 1 out of the way, we are into chapter 2, Rules of the City. We're not going to get into the full in-depths of this because there are a lot of things here, but again, you're going to have your stress gauges, and this is going to go over how you're going to add to your stress or possibly reduce your stress in the game. If your character would ever fully mark in one of these rows, then they're currently out of the game. They're effectively taken out of the game for a period of time. Here it mentions that maybe they've had to go to the hospital, or they've been put into prison, or maybe they're on the run and they can't really continue investigating, or possibly they have even been swayed to the vassals' side. So some information there on how that works. We get into the strengths that you have while you're in the castle, and then some real good information here on the covenants. Again, those relationships that your players have with the other players and with NPCs in the game as well. And then some information on your potency in the game. In the world, it says here, this is a good kind of like this, these two sentences here are a good breakdown. If you grow in potency in the world as your character plays, they may grow stronger in the world. It says the world is you matter, a hand reaching down to pull others back up to their feet. And then there's the chance that you might also grow in potency in the void, where the castle is, which is not a good thing. It makes you incredibly powerful in the castle, but you're starting to be corrupted in some way. And it says void is I matter, fist raised up in defiance against a hostile universe. And there's information here on raising your potency in either the void or the world. But then there's also the possibility that you become too potent and you become overwhelmed by the world or the void, and there's information on that as well. So after that, we're going to get into more of some of the moves that are in the game, and the investigation itself, and it really lays out for you a step-by-step process to go through an investigation and what the investigation could look like, some of the daily actions that everyone could be taking as they play the game as well, because a lot of this is played in a very day-to-day manner, where the players will be going along their everyday lives in the world, again, investigating, trying to figure out who the vassal is. And so you're going to have to be taking it day by day. They're going to be role-playing those connections that they have with those covenants, those NPCs who might be trying to get them information on the vassal. And as they do this, you're either going to be growing those relationships, or maybe some of them don't seem to grow as much and you start to lose some of those. So you can actually gain and lose covenants throughout the game. So you're going to be moving through the city, and these are some of the things that you can do while you're in the city. And that's going to be, again, through the investigation portion of the game. And then you have delving into the castle. And this is going to give you some of the moves that you can do, some of the actions you can take while you're in the castle, but before you've even had the combat with the vassal. You've got some exploration moves that you can be using here as well. And then we have information here on combat itself, minions, traps, and the vassal and their enforcers. And so this is going to have information on how does combat work in the game, especially in the castle. So there's the confrontation moves. And then we have some examples of weapons that can be utilized in the game. Some of them will have perks, some of them will have flaws, and then we have examples as well for armaments that might be used. And then some more breakdown of the aftermath, things that happen once the investigation is done, once the combat against the vassal is complete. Again, whether there is a win against the vassal or a loss against the vassal, there is an aftermath. And then possible retaliation as well, and peace and quiet. So once your investigation over, once the investigation's over, everybody is going to go back to their normal lives, and this is going to have some information for that. Now, chapter 3 is all about the rebels, and again, here it's going to have the playbooks that the players are going to get to choose from. This is the part of the game that I get really, really interested by, because I like seeing some of the things that the author has in mind for these characters. So there's the authority, the captive, the harlequin, the heretic, the icon, the inhuman, the penitent, the provider, the watcher. Now, it does mention here that the captive, inhuman, and penitent are all a little bit of a weirder playbook, and that they are not quite as easy to mesh with these other players and the city itself. And so it's mentioned here that they might actually be more of a distraction from that side of the game. And so it might be something to just think about. You might not want to use those right away, but again, it's up to the players to choose and for the architect to decide as well. So this is the portion of the book that has my favorite art throughout the whole game. Each of the rebels gets their own portion, their own bit of art here. And what we learn in the book is that in the real world, they have their normal jobs, everyday jobs, and lives, and they have their own, obviously, their look. But when they delve into the castle, they take on an avatar. They take on a different form in the castle. And so this is a great work of art here, showing off the authority, who obviously is a doctor in the real world, helping others, trying to make them whole and well. And then this is their avatar when they delve into the castle. And I love that in each of these works of art, we get to see the person in the real world and then their form when they dive into the castle. Everybody's playbook is about 4 pages long, and it's going to give you everything you need in order to create your character and to figure out what their core moves are, what their shadow moves are. If they make any advances in the game as they gain rank in Void or World, then you have the advances that you can actually add to your character. Some of these things are going to be, you're going to gain some advantage on things or disadvantage. You're going to gain new covenants, so you're going to make new relationships as well. And if you're doing that in the castle, then you're going to get to bump up your stats. So while you're fighting in combat against the vassal in the castle, your stats are going to grow. You're going to gain new abilities. And those things are good, but again, it starts to pull you away from the world as you gain points in the void rather than in the world itself. So each of these playbooks is going to have information like that. We have here the captive. So we have someone here who we can see is sick, maybe even dying in bed, but here they are over in the castle and their avatar in the castle. And so again, like the book said a second ago, these are a little bit weirder, harder to see how they play in the world. But you know, there's a lot of great role players out there, and I'm sure you would come up with great ways to pull off these characters. So I'm just going to kind of flip through each of these real quick so we can see the art. This is the one thing that is a little sad for me, is that I love that each of these pieces of art is so big, but I hate how it's like right here, it bleeds over the spine of the book. And so I don't get to see, I want to see each of these in their own like flat version, so that I'm not losing any details here in the middle of the book, because I do enjoy each of these works of art quite a lot, actually. And then we have the heretic. So we have their everyday life, their version of themselves in the castle. And so you're going to do a lot of description here in the game as you tell everybody what your character looks like in the real world, but then you give a description of what they look like in their form in the castle as well. This is the icon. And then we have the inhuman. Again, right here, the main character is right in the bend of the book. You can see these other side characters, but the main character here is split, but right down the middle of the book there. It's kind of hard to see that one. And then we have the penitent. We have the provider. To be totally honest, this is probably who I would want to play as, the provider. I love this idea. Each one of these has the title over here of the playbook, the character, and then it has a little bit for it. This one says, we have to care for each other. That's the only way this becomes something that lasts. And I love that. So I would probably play as a provider in this game, at least for my first time through. There's the watcher. I like this, just all the eyes and things up here on the screen. We have chapter 4 now, which is the covenants. And so this is the relationships that the players will be gaining and losing throughout the game, and the way that they adjust their abilities. And so again, like I said, each one of these, the minor covenants, are going to give them some connections, but then major covenants, they have this list here of 20 things that they're going to, it gives a little description about it, but then each one of these has their own pages in the book as well. And so if you gain a covenant that is the Fool, then you're going to be needing to look through this with you and the architect as you figure out that person and what it is they bring to you in the game. And there's one for each of them. There's the Fool, the Magician, the Oracle, the Gardener, the Auteur, the Sage, the Lovers, the Chariot, Strength, the Hermit, the Wheel of Fortune, Justice, the Vagabond, Death, Temperance, the Devil, the Tower, the Star, the Moon, the Sun, and Judgment. And so each one of those again is like a card in this this tarot that the author has put together to take to help you as you go through the game. Each of these covenants have needs, and so it's broken down into the 4 abilities that you've got here in the castle side of the game. And then there's some rules here for the architect and for the players if you were wanting to make your own covenants, that maybe none of the 20 options in here really reflect exactly what it is you're looking for. Now we have chapter 5. Again, this is for me, kind of like the major chapter, because more than likely, if I were to get to play the game, I would actually be the architect running the game itself. And so it gives us an idea here about the agenda of the game, and your job is to make the city feel real, make their revolution feel necessary and possible, and play to find out what happens. And so again, you are to be you're supposed to be running the game and you're rooting for the players as you run this game. This is not supposed to be an antagonistic thing. You are not trying to beat the players. You're not trying to foil their plans. You're just trying to make the game feel real, their revolution feel necessary and possible. And then you just find out what happens. They may lose, and that is fine, and they may win, and that is fine. But your job is to make it feel real and possible. Gives you some things here to say as you play the game as well. And there are things that the principles of the game demand, things that your prep demands, the rules and honesty demand as well. And so in here, you have the principles of the game as you're running it, and there's a lot of those, and each one of these has a little paragraph of inspiration and description for the architect of the game and how to bring this game to life. And then there are parts, like I said, where the architect, they don't roll dice, but they will be able to make reactions to things that the players have done, especially if the players roll a miss. Then there will be the possibility of reactions for the architect to take. And these reactions are listed here. There are soft reactions, it says, and hard reactions. And then there's a list of the reactions with some information about what those reactions will do for the players or against the players. And there's a lot of really interesting ideas in here for the architect. Styles of running the game talks about possibly running a one-shot in this game, or a limited run, or even a campaign, which I feel like a lot of people will try to do probably this limited run or a short campaign. I find it hard to imagine running just a one-shot in this game. I guess you could just do the game setup, finish that, and just see how it feels. And if you're liking it, then decide to continue on. And if you don't, then that was kind of a one-shot. Otherwise, I don't think a one-shot would probably really be what I was looking for. Probably a limited run, a very short campaign style game where I run a single, there's going to be one investigation probably leading to fighting one individual vassal in their portion of the castle. It would probably be what I would shoot for, and that would be this limited run idea. Gives some information in here about pacing your investigation, the idea of giving the players what it is they want. There's some good information there. Possibly changing the target and then closing out the game itself. So a lot of great information for the architect in this section. And then we get into the castle's terrors, and in the castle's terrors, it's going to give you ideas for running the creatures in the castle itself and running the vassal running. So this is going to give you some good information on running the minions and the vassal in their castle. It's going to give you the qualities of them and how to run a fight scene in the castle itself. And then here's some information on making your vassal. And there are 3 different tiers of vassals. So there's a tier 1 vassal, which is kind of like a very entry level bad guy. And then you have a tier 2 vassal, which is that next step up. And so this is like, maybe it's more where a vassal is on a one-on-one basis. Maybe it's, it's the drunk husband who is beating on his wife, and that is causing a problem in your part of the city. And so you're looking to take this person down who is hurting, demoralizing somebody who you care about. And so that would possibly be an idea of a tier 1 vassal. Tier 2 vassals could be maybe there is a corrupt person in the police force in the city, or maybe it's a corrupt religious person in the city who is starting to take just a small portion of your city and run it down and demoralize the people in that area. And so it's like a slightly tougher vassal or someone a little bit more in the shadows. And then you have your tier 3 vassal. And again, going off of what I was talking about way earlier here in the video was how I was thinking about Daredevil. This would be your kingpin. This would be the person who's way up in the shadows, who's manipulating everything, the whole city, and they're trying to bring their idea of what is right into the world. And it's messing with a lot of people. It's messing with the entire city. So that would be the idea of like a tier 3 vassal. We've got some more information for that, and then we are given some example vassals. So we've got an arms dealer, we've got a cleaner, we've got a child catcher, cop maker, false friend, false prophet, general, live stream punk, philanthropist, representative, social media mogul, stained glass, and then we've got some enforcers as well, and we'll get into that in a second. But each one of these example vassals, you have some things here to choose the quality of their avatar, what their shard looks like. And so again, the shard is their part of the castle. And so you can use this description to help you describe it to the players once they do the dive in. Each one of them is given a tier, a drive, and a plan. And so you will get a lot of good information here on how to bring this vassal to life, and also to build the story around as you're going through the investigation portion of the game. Because again, the vassal lives in the real world and is making real world changes that are affecting the players, and they are rising up against this vassal. And then, like I said, we have the enforcers. So some of these are the minions that could be fought against as well, who are trying to help the vassal. And these are also broken down into the tarot cards as well. And so there's, I think, at least 20 of those as well. Yeah. So these are the upside down versions of the cards we were looking at earlier when it came to the covenants. Chapter 7, again, has a really good way of breaking down some different cities. And they've got some examples here that you might be able to use in your game. And then you have Voidheart and the Tarot. So this breaks down a little bit more information about why the author decided to use the idea of the tarot cards in their game, and how you can possibly use those to help create your vassal as well for your game if you don't want to use one of the pre-made vassals in the game. There's some more information on reading tips for utilizing those cards. And then we have a breakdown of the move summaries. So universal moves, those are the ones that are available at any time. City moves as well. Everyday actions and moves. Investigation procedure moves. Holding yourself together. Castle delving. And exploration moves. Confrontation moves. And then some tags that could come into play as well for the different weapons that they might be using in the game. And then we close with the move index. So I know we kind of rushed through that last little bit there, but that is Voidheart Symphony by Minerva McJonda. And I hope you enjoyed that look through. This is a very full game. There's a lot of content here for running, and it's again, probably it's a little disjointed for me in reading style, but that doesn't mean that what is in here is not a great game. I think it definitely has the possibility to create some amazing stories depending on the players who are there. But if you want to play a game where you're in the real world and you're fighting against injustice and you're rising up against evil in the real world, there's a lot of catharsis to be had in this game for those individuals who want that. And so let's go ahead and come up from the table, and I'm going to give you my final thoughts on Voidheart Symphony. by Minerva McJonda. All right, everybody. Well, we're back up from the table. We've just finished taking a look at Voidheart Symphony by Minerva McJonda. And let's go ahead and break down my thoughts on the game. I'm going to start with my cons, just because there's fewer of them. And then we'll go into the pros of the game, I think, as well. So my con is the book itself is a lot. It is a small book. It's not one of like the real big books. It's a little smaller, but it's thick, and there's a lot to it. There's a lot happening in this book, and I don't know if it was laid out exactly right, at least for my brain. As I was reading through it, there's a lot of vocabulary, new vocabulary being used to talk about subjects that come up in games a lot. So the different vocabulary kind of threw me off a little bit, and then there were parts where it's pointing to other parts of the book, and I found myself not being able to really just kind of flow through the description of the book. I felt like I was having to stop and then flip and then jump to another part and then go back to where I was. And a lot of the time, the first person who gets a hold of one of these books for their crew is the person who's going to end up running the game. They're the one who is interested, and so I found it a little odd that the games masters portion or the architects portion was so far back in the book itself. I think I probably would tend to put that a little bit more to the front of the book, just to kind of help that person who's finding the book see what it is they're going to be doing sooner. Now, obviously, you can just look through the table of contents, jump to that part of the book, and that's fine. But for me, I think it would have made a little bit more sense to put it there. So the book being a little out of order for me, as well as a book that has a lot of kind of new concepts or new vocabulary for these concepts that took a little getting used to, were probably my biggest cons for the game. Pros, though, I love the idea of this game. I love the idea of it being set in the real world, but then crossing over into the supernatural as well. I think that is a really great idea. I like the idea of the players gaining power and getting stronger as they go, but that pulling them away from their world as well, making the relationships that they have harder to hold on to. The idea that they could have these really strong covenants, these major covenants, that if they don't take the time to foster them, can slowly degrade into minor covenants or possibly even lose the covenant altogether. Those relationships, I think, is really, really great. In the book, they talk a little bit about some of the media that you might consume that could inspire you for this game. And the one thing that wasn't listed in the book but was forefront in my mind, just because I've been watching it recently, was the Daredevil show. Put out by Marvel, and the reason that one came into mind was because I could immediately see this game and that world, that show, especially the first season, and how they mix together. And so the idea of Kingpin being the vassal, being the person who is behind everything that's going wrong in Hell's Kitchen, and then all the main characters who are just lawyers, doctors, nurses, just regular individuals living in their apartments who are going through a tough time, and those individuals investigating and trying to figure out who's the person who's behind this, and then wanting to bring them down. But take that and then also put that part into a supernatural world. So that was just the thing that was going through my head, and I was like, oh, I love that show. I love that idea. And then I love the idea of supernatural on top of it. I want to be a part of that. I want to see that come to fruition. And so this game being very heavily based on conversations between the architect, the games master, and the players, is interesting and for me a bit more unique. I know there are a lot of other games out there that do that. This, it's less about the sessions planned ahead of time by the games master or the architect, but it's about the conversation that happens at the table, and slowly the story begins to take place, and the story is forefront, and the decisions, the everyday actions that the players take really, really matter, because that is the story. It's not like here's a story and now you're going to play it. It is let's play, and that's the story. And I think that that's a really interesting and cool way to play a role playing game. And again, like I said, I know there are other games out there like this, but I haven't played a lot of them. And so that is probably the part that really ignites my interest most in this game. So I think it is really cool. I think Minerva McJonda has done a great job creating this game. I hope to get a chance to play it as well, not just read it, because a game never really comes to life. You can't really know if you love a game until you've played it. So I'm really hoping to get the chance to play this one at some point with some friends. Everybody, thank you for watching. I hope you have watched this video and you have decided that you too would like to get a chance to take a look at this game. And if you like the idea of this game, you can head over to rowanrookanddeckard.com, go ahead and get yourself a copy, or go down to your friendly local game store and see if they can get you a copy as well. Thank you, everybody. If you like the video, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Check out all the other great videos that we're putting out here at Tabletop Gaming Guild. And until we talk again, everybody, keep on playing games.